Ready, set. All right, welcome. Thank you, folks, for hanging in there with us. We had a little bit of a link snafu here. I'm so excited to have Azikiwe Mohammed for our Thursday series of live studio visits and artist interviews. And Carolina Wheat, curator at Artfare. And what a pleasure it is to have you, Azikiwe. I've been following your work for, I think, 4 or 5 years now since you won the Rema Hort Foundation Award. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a very strange thing to have happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a type of prestige, I suppose. I mean, you've had a beautiful solo show at the Knockdown Center, a large, almost retrospective at SCAD's museum. You've presented work at Anna's Arena, having a solo show. You've definitely have some incredible exhibitions, installations that I've been blessed to been witness to as well at spring break for the last few years. And we're just really excited to have you here today and talk a little bit about what makes you you and your art, Azikiwe Mohammed's art.
Yeah, people somehow aren't bored yet, which is good news. You're always, what is it? You're always one hit away from your greatest failure, right? I think that's the phrase somebody never used. But also, yeah, it's a pleasure to be working with somebody with as wide a practice as you, Carolina, whether it's your own work, whether it's Elijah Wheat in the curatorial sense, whether it's the curatorial sense added to a financial sense in terms of Artfare. It's a pretty wide circumstance, and as somebody that happens to do a wide variety of things, it's always nice when somebody looks across the table, right? I think that's a good way to think about it. So thanks for looking across the table.
But you are now in your studio. You are back. You're there, you're making work for a couple of things coming up, which are really exciting, we're gonna hear about. But your studio is in Jersey, correct? It's in Newark, is it? Or
Jersey City, it's at Mann Contemporary.
Mann Contemporary, it's fantastic. Yeah. And so you're making the commute out and you're there now. I know we had talked briefly about you taking a little break from quarantine lockdown styles. Did you make any work while you were home, or did you kind of just take this as a rest?
Well, the trick about this specific circumstance that we all have ended up in was that timing wise, I had planned on taking some time after spring break, art show. Spring break, it comes down, I think March 18th was the final day. And March 20th, we all kind of got locked in our houses. So I'd like to apologize to everybody. I had planned on me being locked in the house, but not everybody else being locked in their homes. I feel like it's my fault. I just wanted to say I apologize. So one of the things that I had planned on, because last year was very long. I was home maybe 3 months cumulative out of the year. Those months were towards the end of the year, so I could focus on the show at Anna's Arena, and then Material Art Fair with Beverly's and Spring Break, both Los Angeles and New York. But then spending this time looking at what it is that my hands made last year and what they need to make going forward. I started letting more paintings out, but it's a wider story than just the paintings, the performative work, which is a large amount of it, is good. I like it. Well, I don't dislike it. I think that's fair to say. But there's a way to make it really work and hit more for the people, for the intended audience. So trying to take some time to really think about what those things are. And now, the circumstance that we're in, all we're seeing are the circumstances which need attention. So everybody's looking in the same places because there's nowhere else to look at. I also am one of those people who is looking. Some of the things I think that I've tried to look at more is the work that I'm making helping anybody?
Mm-hmm.
Am I making things less shitty for whomever, whether directly by providing services, whether providing an experience that is one that may not be readily available to them in their daily lives? And a lot of and who are the people that need things the most? Pardon, now a lot of these concerns are concerns that objects can share, but aren't married to objects specifically. So a lot of what I've been making during these 3 or so months that we have all been trying to keep each other alive has been less object-based, more sounds, some video work. Today's the 2nd, right? Yeah, the show 5, from We Buy Gold just came down, had a video piece in there. I've been making a lot of just my sort of regular DJ mixes, but a few things more pointed. One was called Keep That Same Energy. It was a collection of speeches, poems, songs that sort of talk about how this isn't a moment. Because a lot of people say that in this moment, things are, no, this has been going on for a quadrillion years. So what do you do when you get home from being tired at, protest time biking? Noises. You've had enough visual for the day, right? Even given that we're looking for more things to watch, I think we have enough without me adding more noise. So what's something that can be a real use and drown out the helicopters that we're hearing hovering over all of our homes? Those are noises. So I've been trying to focus largely on noises. And as I've been listening to the noises that I've been making, voices, little voices of other people, and helicopters a lot, honestly. I just started figuring out objects that make more sense. So in the past week or so, it's turned again into object making.
Right. I mean, with that, you give yourself the physical space now that you're back in the studio to almost give yourself the environment that's conducive to making those objects. It reminds me a lot of being on the road when I was working, coming from a textiles and drawing background 20 years ago, and kind of realizing that I lost my studio space after leaving my bachelor's degree, and not having access to basically some major studio equipment. I realized that I kind of not changed my practice, but I developed more of a different practice for that which I could carry with me, for that which I could do in hotels or Airbnbs or wherever I was going to be. So I became more of a writer and curator. So it sounds like this time where you're making things, it will be very fruitful. But I'm so fascinated by your interest in sound and how the sound has been influencing, the current environmental sounds have been influencing your work. Kind of digging through your website the past few weeks, I discovered things that I hadn't heard before of yours, and that was the first time series, 5 or 6 interviews of folks you said had called you and left a message remembering the first time they remembered they were Black or a person of color. And
A voicemail, a voice memo.
a voice memo.
Voice memo. Yeah, I don't have to be. The less I'm involved in anything that I'm involved in, the better off I find it. So I would ask people that had showed interest. There were 1 or 2 people that I reached out to, but for the most part, somebody would hear something or heard that I was doing a thing, and then they record a voice memo on their phone and then text or email it to me, right? A task. It's not a conversation. It's not an interview, because when we're talking about doing the dishes, where do the plates come from? Why are we eating this large meal on this kind of small saucer plate? Like, there's a lot of different conversational directions based on my relation to the cookware, based on your background. Maybe you're a ceramicist, and that goes into a whole.
Yeah.
But if you say, hey, Azikiwe, could you go wash this dish? And I say, hey, Carolina, could you go wash this dish? It's going to take us the same amount of time to perform that task because no one else is involved. So most of my first time, retellings all came out to about the same length. It's about 2 minutes and 30 or so seconds from everyone. Now, there was one person that it ended up being, it was 16 minutes. But that's because they are a first generation American. They're from a variety of countries in Africa. So it's not even one country. They moved around. I guess it's the equivalent of like a military family. They moved around a bunch over there, and Blackness is a distinctly American trait that makes sense to other people, but isn't something that other people can embody. Now, there are many characteristics of it. There's, clothing, verbiage, cultural stuff, but for the most part, it's an American idea. So he learned what it is to be Black as he spent more time here. So for him, it's a very different task. It's a outward coming in and then in coming back out. Whereas for those of us here that are Black in this, current America, it's something that's internal that goes out and then comes back in. So it's switched. And apparently that switch adds 14 minutes, which, cool. But in total, I would say there are 25, 30 of these. I just have to get them off of the tapes that they've been put on, and then turn them into the records.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that was one part of the works that you could hear the lo-fi quality, the grainy quality of the records themselves being played for the recording. So the voicemail becomes the record, becomes this MP3 that we're listening to. So that kind of idea or metaphor of translation is even more poignant because the experience is transferable or I mean, maybe even an understanding that the experience that they're sharing is quite private as well as personal, and all of the filters to kind of get to it, the audience becomes a little bit more removed from that actual feeling within the voicemail, yet you still are hearing very clearly their thoughtful experience, and I appreciate that. And
That's one of the nice things about having you mentioned it's a very private moment. It's private until you realize that so many people have, any Black person has a version of that story. It's just a super, super easy thing. Whether you think about it or not, frequently is a different thing, but everybody has a version of that. But it's rare that it comes up in conversation. It's rare that it's something that you think about actively, because very often those aren't the happiest moments when your internal mirror meets the external mirror, because the space between those two mirrors is where your idea of self comes from, right? If somebody, if you put on like a big poofy blouse, like polka dots, right? I just bought one of those, that's why it came to mind. So like you put one of those on and you go outside, it's like, this says this is who I am. And you go outside and then you get a weird response from the external mirror. You're like, oh, they're not seeing me as clear as I thought that I was. Maybe I need to do something different. Maybe I need to color my hair, maybe some piercing, or whatever, right? But when you don't choose what shirt you're wearing. When it's just you, there literally is no shirt. There is no set dressing of any sort. It feels very confusing when that external mirror is saying something to you that you weren't aware of. When you're being told that you're wearing a shirt, and you're like, what shirt are you talking about? I forgot to put one on when I left the house, right? So having all of these stories lined up next to each other and allowing somebody in the physical world have this library of these records, and you can listen through to a variety of these all at once, has it not be a singular experience, but a shared experience, and a shared experience that is listened to in private on the headphones, but is shared amongst all of the people that have added their stories, and always looking for more, always recording more. It's a living archive.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, it brings to mind the reverberation that you were speaking to, where the political climate of the civil rights movement and national revolution that we're hopefully going to see happen. I know it's been 50 plus years of just constant struggle, and the reverberation that I was speaking to, just you can have this knowingness now, and to have these recordings for other individuals. I'm wondering, are you taking more recordings or voice mails? Have you been interviewing more folks, or what is it exactly that you're doing with sound right now?
I mean, if it's not they're not, my first time recordings aren't interviews, so whenever somebody wants to send one in, great, always willing to take. I provide a few guidelines, because there was one booth I made. It was for the Forward Union Fair when they had it at the Red Bull Space in Chelsea. And I made a recording booth that people could come in, say whatever they wanted to. And then it ended up being a lot of white people apologizing, which was a lot to listen through because it was hours and hours of audio. So after that, I had a little set of guidelines, just in terms of, you know, whose voice is heard normally and whose isn't, and who this space is sort of made to amplify. And in relation to a lot of the sonic work that I've been doing during our COVID crisis, it's been, in addition to, you know, my regular radio show, if other people have said it better, there's no need to say, just point a finger. It's like, hey, listen to X human, right? So trying to put together for other people, both as, you know, teaching tools, because a lot of people, you know, asking, hey, like, how are you? I don't know, horrible. What do you want? What, you know, what kind of answer? What can I do? I don't know. That's giving me a task and making more work for me to try to figure out something to then make you feel better. That's more work without anything actually coming back towards me. Now, this isn't a blanket statement. Clearly, you know, there's, you know, circumstances, but there's a lot of people that are looking for answers and ways to feel better, right? Or a starting place. Where do I start doing the work that I've seen people do for years, but I never thought involved me? I was always too busy to be involved in. Now ain't nobody got no excuse. You ain't got nothing to do. You ain't got no damn job. You can't leave your house. So this is a perfect time to start trying to figure out, you know, what's happening. So, poems, you know, speeches, you know, songs, ostensibly any record made between the late 60s and mid to late 70s had at least 2 social songs on there. So you got a lot to choose from, you know, but just having an option for people to be able to listen to thoughts from people that have been doing the work, that it's not me, I'm new to this, same as, you know, a lot of other people, or people that the circumstances we are seeing come to the fore have been affecting for longer than just the 3 months that a lot of us have been noticing them.
Right. I've always appreciated the fact that you, as you mentioned, amplify other voices, whether it is music or whether it's old clips from the television. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about, too, your interests and prowess truly in getting some of this analog data out and back into the public. And like a lot of your video mixtures, even the equipment that you use a lot happens to be patched through like this extraordinary lengthy explanation of through the mica to this to the RCA to this. Your patching capabilities have always really been impressive, and I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about how these found sounds, these found videos come together, and why a lot of times the analog presentation is so important to you.
It's warm. You know, there's warmth there. And there's enough coldness without adding more cold. You know, nobody needs that. So whenever possible, make it as warm as possible and trust the source, trust the origin source. If it came on a high tape, keep it there. There's a reason somebody put it there, didn't digitize it, didn't transfer it. Maybe they weren't financially able to. But chances are, they went shopping around, they looked for the item that made the most sense for them, because all items that we bring into our lives are receptacles for memory, some more than others. I think of imaging devices as pretty large receptacles, equally as large as clothing, because our physical skin falls off into the clothes. Your hair gets, right? You ever do laundry in like a public laundromat and it comes back with a whole big brown tuft of hair? You're like, I don't even know anybody with brown hair. Like, what's happening here, right? This is, because that is one of the items that takes from us while it's giving us a means to create new versions of ourselves, right? So stick with it. If it's a high 8 tape, figure out how to get that out so that other humans can see it. Because for many Black, brown, and marginalized people, creating, or I like to say freezing the circumstance, is as far as they think, because we don't expect to live extraordinarily long lives, as we are told and reminded very frequently. So every day you wake up, you won. You already won. You beat out the odds that you weren't gonna make it to another morning time. So whenever you're kind of collapsing these memories, experiences, circumstances into a physical item that you would be able to hand off to somebody else, you're so excited that you made it again, that you made it to another birthday, that putting the item, the experience, into the item, you're already tired. That's a lot of work. Figuring out how to get that into a computer or send that out and share that. Now, with a lot of the technology that we have now, it's gotten easier and easier. So we're starting to see more of these videos. We're starting to see more of these moments that used to only live and die on these tapes. But that's where a lot of this comes from, is the fact that we don't have the time, we don't have the extra brain power to take that added step to send those memories out so they live inside of the capture device. So then it ends up with a CD player that has somebody's funerary playlist in there, like a tablet that'll have one video on it, VCR handy cams that have tapes still